Morning.
Welcome. My name is Patty Purper DeVries, and I am currently the Associate Director of Faculty Staff Wellbeing at Stanford University and the Director of the LeadWell Network. And today I get to share with you some of my favorite information about the research and what's being done with physician burnout, also with just self-compassion and what we can do about it with our employees and with ourselves. So I want to start with just letting you know that I have no disclosures to make. I'm pretty much an open book, and what I want to share with you today are the life skills that I've learned for many years working not only with our providers, but also being an athlete, being a business owner, and working just in the industry and learning a lot of these skills and tips that are valuable. With the work that we're doing, what we've been learning about burnout, for those of you who know a physician, who are a physician, who work in the medical industry, we know that burnout is a major issue. And so I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about the elements of burnout, but what we're seeing is between the inefficiencies of practice, the implementation of the electronic medical records, which we know is a big piece of this, increased complexity of medical care, increased performance measurements, all of those things are putting a lot of pressure on our providers to do more and more, oftentimes with less. So what that looks like, and the burnout, the three components of burnout are emotional exhaustion, reduced performance, and interpersonal disengagement. So that interpersonal disengagement with even each other. And what that often looks like is simply this.
Hearing aids work better.
Welcome, come on in. We're just getting started. And so our empathy fail is this, is that when we're burned out and we have that interpersonal disengagement, what it really looks like is just an empathy fail, which is essentially this. I have a headache and the response is, I hope you die. And that's what we're trying to avoid. So the reasons to address burnout is certainly 63% of it within in this article is a decrease in quality of care, and the second highest is the effect of the attitude of the rest of the healthcare team. And so what I will be talking about today is how we as leaders in the organization can also work to change that dynamic and to change the dynamic of the personal care. And I did shower today, so hopefully some folks when they come in, somebody will say, oh, that's up close. That's what I did. So I just want to welcome you to this. So of course we want to take care of burnout, because for any of you who have felt the effects of burnout, it's certainly not good for us for individuals, but it certainly also impacts very negatively the dynamics of the whole care team. So just some more articles that were written and have been written about it. There's been a lot of work done from the Mayo Clinic. Tate Changenfeld is now at Stanford, and those articles continue to be written and looked at in a lot of these ways. So what is burnout at its core? And at its core, what we're learning is that burnout is an inability to experience positive emotions. The more burned out we are, the less we see joy, the less things actually seem less colorful, because we cannot perceive the positive things in our world. And that essentially is it. There's been some work done by J. Brian Sexton and some others that really show this to be true. The higher you are on the burnout scale, the less you're able to actually experience those things in life that will actually bring you joy. So at Stanford, what we've done is, yes, we want to reduce burnout. And nationally, burnout is at a rate about 54%. At Stanford, it's lower than that, but it's still too high. Our female physicians are burned out at a rate of 39%, and our male physicians are burned out at a rate of 28%. We're still looking for why that is. One of the things that we've looked at is self-compassion, and I will be talking a little bit more about that, the lack of self-compassion and its role in burnout in our care providers. So what we are focusing on, yes, we want to reduce burnout, and we feel we can reduce burnout by focusing on professional fulfillment, focusing on those things that take away our professional fulfillment and adding back in those things to support our employees in professional fulfillment. We define that as happiness or meaningfulness, self-efficacy, and satisfaction at work. That is my goal for not only our physicians, but our faculty, our staff members, and all of those who work together in the community that is Stanford. So the university has 16,000 employees. Of those, there's about 3,000 physicians, and on the two hospitals, there's another 16,000 employees. So for a total of 32,000 employees and 32,000 lives that we are really searching and driving towards professional fulfillment rather than your traditional wellness model of the biometric model, reducing your blood pressure and cholesterol. All of those things are important, but when we're looking at worksite wellness, we're really focusing on professional fulfillment. So as part of our model, have most of you seen this model, or some of you? How many of you have seen this model from Stanford? This is the WellMD model that was developed at Stanford, and what it does is it really takes a broader look at wellness. So WellMD was established to help reduce the burnout of our physicians and really make an impact nationally. And the way this model has worked, and we've actually published this model, and I can send some links to that if you're interested. The way it looks at it, yes, we're still focused on this professional fulfillment piece. And what we've learned through the two surveys, we did a survey in 2013 and another survey in 2016 with all of our physicians. And what we learned is, yes, personal resilience is important. But we had so many physicians come to us and say, if one more person tells me to take a mindfulness class, something bad is going to happen. So we understand that we have been treating our physicians as the problem and giving them solutions to fix themselves instead of looking at what we're doing as an organization to increase their burnout. And so yes, this personal resilience piece is one of it, and it's how we eat, move, think, and sleep. It's a traditional wellness model of all of those things that we do and that we come to the world with. But what we've been missing for all these years is the fact that that culture that we're putting our people into is vitally important. And if that work culture is one where the leadership is not creating a positive work environment, that's taking away from the professional fulfillment of all of our employees. And that really is important on the leadership piece of it, is this culture of wellness. 63% of our people identify the leadership as the main role in creating the culture, whether it's supportive of our personal and professional fulfillment and our health, or it takes away from it. How controlling is that leadership? Is there some autonomy? All of those things. And then the last piece that we have as a industry and as an organization that we failed to look at is, do our employees have what they need to be successful? And that is what we call the efficiency of practice piece of this. This is in this area of the efficiency of practice, the electronic medical record being the biggest piece of that. What we're doing is we're hurting our people by telling them to go fix themselves and take another mindfulness class and we'll reduce their burnout. And what we're doing is we've been forgetting to take care of these other pieces. And so we're putting them in these environments that are not helping them and more taking away from them. When for each hour of patient care, there are 2 hours of electronic medical records, work that needs to be done on the evenings and weekends. We're not giving them a lot of chance to take care of themselves. They don't have time in their life to take care of their personal resilience if what we're doing on the outside is causing issues. So as we go in today, what I want to share are some things that have resonated at Stanford and at the hospitals at Stanford that I think are really significant in terms of how we treat each other, and this piece specifically in the culture of wellness. That's more my area of work, because this personal resilience, we all know what we should be doing, and we all wish we had the time to spend to take better care of ourselves. But what I'm wanting to do more of an impact is creating a more positive work culture, because the efficiency of practice piece, that's going to need to be done and is being done on a more national level, is how do we create a better EPIC? Do you use EPIC here? What do you use here? EPIC? I know that Dean Miner at the Stanford School of Medicine did a symposium last June. They brought leaders from across the country to look at ways to do a better job with EPIC. There hasn't been a lot of motivation from the EPIC organization to make changes, and we're trying to influence that on a more national level so that we can support many more people in making those changes. So that is being done, but for today, what we're going to focus on more is that culture, because I'm not somebody who can impact EPIC, but we do have people that are working on that on a national. Any thoughts on this? Yes.
I was wondering how your work in culture of wellness impacts your leadership, your medical staff leadership.
We're making inroads, because what's happening is that we're starting to see that they want to need. Even the leadership is saying enough's enough. we need to change this. And so we're making little inroads into it, but again, it's a cultural thing. For years and years, getting 2 hours of sleep at night was a badge of honor. You come into work, it's like, man, I worked really hard and I did this and this is my badge of honor, and this is something we were really proud of. Yes?
How do you measure success with the 3,000 physicians?
We measure it by less turnover. What we've learned is that based on our survey from 2013 to 2016, with the burnout rates being at 39% and 38%, 28% and 39%, that if we left things as they were and didn't intervene, we would have lost 80 physicians in a period of the next 2 years. 80 physicians, what we know nationally, and we were able to verify with our finance teams at the hospital, it costs between $250,000 and $1 million for every physician we lose and need to replace. That's up to $88 million, at least at $22 million. So every physician that we can support to keep them employed with Stanford is a win. That's how we're looking to measure it right now. And certainly from our physician wellness survey, we're going to be doing it again. I think we're launching it in March of this year. So that will be our 3rd year of information. Our burnout rates went up and our professional fulfillment actually went down from 2013 to 16. We don't know exactly why that is. Certainly things were getting worse with the implementation of all of these things, but at the same time, we almost doubled the number of people who took the survey. We really feel that more people were willing to give their opinions because they felt that we were actually ready to do something. After 2016, we had that data, but we didn't have a team together. The team didn't actually get put together until about 2016 to start making improvements. And then we did the survey again, so that was still another almost baseline. This 2019 will be really an interesting survey to see where those numbers are. So one of the things, and it's a simplistic thing, have any of you heard of this book? It's not scientific, it is incredibly woo-woo, would you agree? It's very woo-woo is my technical term for this book, but what I want to do is share with you why I think it is just so valuable into the work that we're doing. And one of the things is that it's called The 4 Agreements, and I've known about this book for about 14 years. And when 14 years ago I had my company, I was running the company that was overseeing the fitness facilities and wellness centers for Cisco, Yahoo, Google, KLA-Tencor, and Safeway. And we helped create those facilities. We had designed those facilities, and we were running these facilities. I had about 100 employees before I sold my company. And I found this book, and I just felt that it really resonated in the world of wellness and how we treat each other. And for me, a wellness program and creating a culture of wellness really is about treating our people in a way that resonates with them and is kind to them. So what I wanted to share with you is these 4 agreements, because again, it's resonated in a very simple way, but I think a very practical way with not only our physician leaders, but also the teams that we work with. The first one being impeccable with your word. The second one is to not take things personally, to not make assumptions, and to always do your best. Now on the surface, it seems pretty easy that we might be able to do this. Maybe not. I'll tell you first off that the second one is by far the hardest one. But we have groups at the Stanford teams, they've made little bookmarks on it, they've posted this in these break rooms, and I'm going to share with you fairly briefly what each of these mean in terms of wellness and how we look at it. The first one was being impeccable with your word, and we are seeing more and more the tie between how we interact with each other, self-compassion, and how we work. What we've learned and what we're going to be learning more of as we go forward, and I believe in the 2019 survey, what we're going to find is even more information about the role of self-compassion and self-compassion in the workplace. There's a great book by Kristin Neff. In the future, I'll be doing some more presentations about that because I feel that it's so powerful. One of the things that we learned, and you'll see more coming down the pipe about information about this, is that we found out that lack of self-compassion is actually a better predictor of burnout than burnout itself. So if we have a physician that is showing some symptoms of burnout, but they've learned some tools and techniques for self-compassion, they're going to be less likely to leave in the next 2 years. So we're really looking at that role of self-compassion and what it is. And I'll give you an example of why this is so important. What Mickey Trossel has shared is that we are certainly all human. And nobody, and I've asked, yesterday I had a group of 75 people down in Sylmar, and I asked them, how many of you would be okay with a a less than perfect physician. One person of the about 75 people raised their hand. Nobody wants a less than perfect physician. The problem is nobody on this planet is a perfect person, and there's not a perfect physician. So we've got this dilemma of how do you shoot for perfection, not want to admit any failures because nobody wants a less than perfect physician, and then the human nature. And the only way to bridge that gap is really through that measure of self-compassion and being able to support ourselves in that and knowing that human condition. Mickey Troffel presented our findings to a group of about 60 primary care physicians, and he shared this information about the self-compassion. And he simply asked, and I would ask you to do this as well, think about a time when you really messed up, and all of us have. For physicians, unfortunately, that means messing up means life or death. For the rest of us, it means, maybe not having a very good presentation that day. There's a huge difference in the scalability of that. But for you, if you think about the last time you made a mistake, what was your self-talk? What did you say to yourself when you're experiencing that mistake, when you've messed something up in a really bad way? And if you think about those things, and then what Mickey did was called on first, and I don't think he planned this, because it's not really Mickey's sort of thing, but he happened to call on a female physician first. And he said, okay, well, what was your self-talk when you messed up? I don't need to hear about what happened, but what was your self-talk? And the female physician said, I couldn't get out of my head that I am just simply not cut out for this. I should never have become a doctor. I'm not good enough. I made this mistake. I should probably quit. She's much more likely to be quitting and burning out and leaving. Then he called on a male physician, and I'm not saying it's as easy as this is black and white, but in this particular instance it was. He called on a male physician, and the response was, you know what, I'll do better next time. What a difference. We're going to have a burned out physician because of that lack of self-compassion and that understanding and that belief that they're not good enough versus the growth mindset on the other side of I'm not there yet, and I'm going to make sure I learn from that mistake. And those are powerful pieces of information. They're anecdotal, but I think it's something really important for us to look into as we're trying to preserve those people who are most compassionate to our employees and to our patients, and to really take care of them and find ways to develop those self-compassion skills. Any questions about that? Okay. So when it comes to being impeccable with your word and the whole wellness thing, is that I really believe that we all come into any given situation and we come with an energy about us. Even Einstein said everything is energy. It's all amount of energy. And we come into any given situation with that. And some of us come into it, we bring joy to a room. And then there are others, and we all know this person named Helga. Does anyone know a Helga? Hopefully not. We all know this Helga that comes into a situation and can just crush the energy in the room. Does anyone know someone like that?
Debbie Downer.
What's that?
Debbie Downer.
Debbie Downer. Yeah, and we have a Debbie and she names a Downer on our team, so I can't use Debbie, but I will use the word name, the name Helga, and the day I meet a Helga, I'm going to be mortified, but I should probably start asking if there's any Helgas in the room before I ever start. But being impeccable with your word is that you build up energy. That you look at yourself in the mirror in the morning instead of just being completely critical that we often are, because most of us have been raised as perfectionists. We have to be perfect. We have to drive towards perfection. Medical schools are known that it is a cutthroat. You just need to be perfect. If you're not perfect, you're not good enough. And that simply is not a sustainable model. None of us can live under that constant pressure to do that. And again, I grew up in that way too. I grew up in North Dakota. I had very strict parents. There was, coming to Stanford, being an athlete at Stanford. I went to the Olympic trials in '88. The pressure was great, nothing like being a doctor. But I understand a portion of what you must go through, but I didn't have to have that perfection. It was certainly not life and death. So I can only understand a teeny piece of it, but I understand the pressure of needing to be as perfect as you can be, and how do you do that? So I'm spending my lifetime trying to figure out those practical things that can help you, and I find that this is one of those things that do. When you're impeccable with your words, you build up your own energy and those around you. And I can't look at people when I do this, but I want you to think about the last time somebody looked at you and said, wow, you look so tired. Are you okay? What is your energy? What happens to your energy when somebody says that to you? All of a sudden you just dropped, right? All of a sudden you may have felt fine, and then somebody looks at you and says it, and I'm like, well, I thought it was fine, but I guess you should go home and take a nap or take a nap, right? So it just drains your energy. Now keep in mind that this is somebody that really is showing you they care. They're trying to show you they care, and look what that does to your energy level. So now imagine that same person, or Helga, coming in and just complaining about everything you've just done. And unfortunately, that's what we often do. We focus on what's wrong instead of what's right. So if we can start focusing on how much energy we give to ourselves and how much energy we give to others or take away from others by paying attention and being impeccable with your word. To me, certainly impeccability of your word is that you have integrity, that you speak your truth, that you speak your, in a kind way. All of those things, being impeccable with your word is important. But to me, in terms of wellness, it's about building each other up, starting with yourself. Looking at how you talk to yourself, looking at the self-talk. Are you bringing yourself down and criticizing yourself on an ongoing basis, or are you building yourself and others up? And oftentimes, if I'm feeling really tired, and I rarely miss a day, I have so much sick time stored up and so little time, I just don't call in because I don't usually get sick. And if I do, or if my energy is really low, what I often will do is play a little mind game with myself, and that mind game goes something like this. Man, I'm really tired today. Man, I just don't want to do anything. But man, if my daughter called up and said she just won 2 tickets to Disneyland, could I rally and get on that plane and go have some fun? I'm like, yeah, I could. I'm fine. I just need to get on with whatever's going on in my head because I could rally right now. I'm not sick. I just need to re-emphasize and do something different in my self-talk, because usually it's the self-talk that's bringing me down. So I think this one's an important one. If we can do this with each other and know that we're building somebody up instead of cutting somebody down, will help the energy level and the burnout in and of itself. The second one's to not take things personally, and I'll tell you right now, that's the hardest one. So imagine the Helga that's walking through, critical. This is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong, that's wrong, you gotta fix this. First of all, Helga's probably not in a very good place right now. She's probably not. She's only being critical of everything. And some of us, we can all be Helga at one given time or another. But how do we keep from taking that personally? If Helga's upset and things are wrong, first off, we got to fix what's wrong, because we do want to be as perfect as we can. We don't want things to go unchecked and undone. But how do we not take it on personally? Because when we take it on personally, then it becomes even bigger. And so what we want to do is to not take this on personally, and that how others treat you is realizing that it's not a reflection of you, it's really a reflection of their internal world, and what we need to do better on as a group. Make sense? Any questions on that? Okay. And then the third one is not to make assumptions. We have to have the courage to ask questions. If Helga's coming storming through, if she's upset about things, everything's wrong, what's going on, can we clarify what's wrong and what we need to do differently? Because nobody wants to work in an environment where we don't know how you can succeed or fail. You want to work in an environment where you know exactly what's expected of you, so that we can all work together and make improvements on what's happening. And then, of course, the last one, and I've been trying to do this for all of my life, is last one's always do your best. Always give 100% unless you're donating blood. And so what we want to do is, none of us, again, are perfect. But if we can live by some of these agreements as teams, what I've found is it's much easier for them to communicate with each other and build a more positive work environment. So those are the 4 agreements. It's just a simple little thing that we often will talk about within our teams. At Stanford, a lot of the groups have taken it on. I usually will start a presentation with this because I want the room to feel also safe, to be able to open up and communicate some of the different things that are going on. So I want to share with you, this is one of my favorite videos. Have any of you seen this by Drew Dudley? This is part of what I'm talking about that costs nothing, that can absolutely change a work environment. A lot of it's that 4 agreements and how we pay attention and speak to each other. But this video is one of my all-time favorites because I think it says a lot about leadership and our influence.
I want to just start by asking everyone in the audience here a question. How many of you are completely comfortable with calling yourselves a leader? See, I've asked that question all the way across the country, and everywhere I ask it, no matter where, there's always a huge portion of the audience that won't put up their hand. And I've come to realize that we have made leadership into something bigger than us. We made it into something beyond us. We made it about changing the world. And we've taken this title of leader and we treat it as if it's something that one day we're going to deserve. But to give it to ourselves right now means a level of arrogance or cockiness that we're not comfortable with. And I worry sometimes that we spend so much time celebrating amazing things that hardly anybody can do, that we've convinced ourselves that those are the only things we're celebrating. And we start to devalue the things that we can do every day. And we start to take moments where we truly are a leader, and we don't let ourselves take credit for it, and we don't let ourselves feel good about it. And I've been lucky enough over the last 10 years to work with some amazing people who have helped me redefine leadership in a way that I think has made me happier. And with my short time today, I just want to share with you the one story that is probably most responsible for that redefinition. I went to a school in a little school called Mount Allison University in Sackville, New Brunswick. And on my last day there, a girl came up to me and she said, "I remember the first time that I met you." And then she told me a story that happened 4 years earlier. She said, "On my day before I started university, I was in the hotel room with my mom and my dad, and I was so scared and so convinced that I couldn't do this, that I wasn't ready for university, that I just burst into tears. And my mom and my dad were amazing. They were like, 'Look, we know you're scared, but let's just go tomorrow. Let's go to the first day. And if at any point you feel as if you can't do this, that's fine. Just tell us, we will take you home. We love you no matter what.'" And she says, so I went the next day and I was standing in line getting ready for registration, and I looked around and I just knew I couldn't do it. I knew I wasn't ready. I knew I had to quit. And she says, I made that decision, and as soon as I made it, there was this incredible feeling of peace that came over me. And I turned to my mom and my dad to tell them that we needed to go home. And just at that moment, you came out of the Student Union building wearing the stupidest hat I have ever seen in my life. It was awesome. And you had a big sign promoting Shinorama, which is Students Fighting Cystic Fibrosis, a charity I've worked with for years. And you had a bucket full of lollipops. And you were walking along and you were handing the lollipops out to people in line and talking about Shinorama. And all of a sudden, you got to me and you just stopped and you stared. It was creepy. This girl right here knows exactly what I'm talking about. And then you looked at the guy next to me and you smiled and you reached in your bucket, you pulled out a lollipop and you held it out to him. And you said, "You need to give a lollipop to the beautiful woman standing next to you." And she said, "I have never seen anyone get more embarrassed faster in my life." He turned beet red, and he wouldn't even look at me. He just kind of held the lollipop out like this. And I felt so bad for this dude that I took the lollipop. And as soon as I did, you got this incredibly severe look on your face, and you looked at my mom and my dad, and you said, "Look at that. Look at that. First day away from home, and already she's taking candy from a stranger." And she said everybody lost it. 20 feet in every direction, everyone started to howl. And I know this is cheesy, and I don't know why I'm telling you this, but in that moment when everyone was laughing, I knew that I shouldn't quit. I knew that I was where I was supposed to be, and I knew that I was home. And I haven't spoken to you once in the 4 years since that day, but I heard that you were leaving. And I had to come up and tell you that you've been an incredibly important person in my life, and I'm gonna miss you. Good luck. And she walks away, and I'm flattened. And she gets about 6 feet away, she turns around and smiles and goes, "You should probably know this too. I'm still dating that guy 4 years later." A year and a half after I moved to Toronto, I got an invitation to their wedding. Here's the kicker, I don't remember that. I have no recollection of that moment, and I've searched my memory banks because that is funny, and I should remember doing it, and I don't remember it. And that was such an eye-opening, transformative moment for me to think that maybe the biggest impact I'd ever had on anyone's life, a moment that had a woman walk up to a stranger 4 years later and say, "You've been an incredibly important person in my life," was a moment that I didn't even remember. How many of you guys have a lollipop moment, a moment where someone said something or did something that you feel fundamentally made your life better? All right. How many of you have told that person they did it? See, why not? We celebrate birthdays where all you have to do is not die for 365 days. And yet we let people who have made our lives better walk around without knowing it. And every single one of you has been the catalyst for a lollipop moment. You have made someone's life better by something that you said or that you did. And if you think you haven't, think about all the hands that didn't go back up when I asked that question. You're just one of the people who hasn't been told. But it is so scary to think of ourselves as that powerful. It can be frightening to think that we can matter that much to other people. Because as long as we make leadership something bigger than us, as long as we keep leadership something beyond us, as long as we make it about changing the world, we give ourselves an excuse not to expect it every day from ourselves and from each other. Marianne Williamson said, "Our greatest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our greatest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light and not our darkness that frightens us." And my call to action today is that we need to get over that. We need to get over our fear of how extraordinarily powerful we can be in each other's lives. We need to get over it so we can move beyond it. And our little brothers and our little sisters, and one day our kids, or our kids right now, can watch us start to value the impact we can have on each other's lives more than money and power and titles and influence. We need to redefine leadership as being about lollipop moments. How many of them we create, how many of them we acknowledge, how many of them we pay forward, and how many of them we say thank you for. Because we've made leadership about changing the world, and there is no world. There's only 6 billion understandings of it. And if you change one person's understanding of it, one person's understanding of what they're capable of, one person's understanding of how much people care about them, one person's understanding of how powerful an agent for change they can be in this world, you've changed the whole thing. And if we can understand leadership like that, I think if we can redefine leadership like that, I think we can change everything. And it's a simple idea, but I don't think it's a small one. And I want to thank you all so much for letting me share it with you today. Having a great day at TED. I'll see you later.
So one of my favorite quotes, of course, is from Maya Angelou. I've learned that people will forget what you said and they will forget what you did. They'll never forget how you made them feel. And I think that is so important as we build our teams and we create more of a culture of wellness, because that culture is what's going to keep our people here. There's been a lot of research on managers and teams, and when somebody is struggling or the relationships are negative, they're much more likely to call out sick or go out on disability. So how do we create a better work environment so that when people are struggling, they actually want to come here to feel supported and get their work done and feel successful in what they do? How many feel that there's just way too much appreciation and acknowledgement around here? Anybody? Way too much? Maybe make a little bit more, and that piece starts with us. Because oftentimes, it's not that we need to do all this work. It's not that it all has to come from us. But when we acknowledge other people's successes and the things they do well, that's powerful instead of waiting for perfection. Because again, if we can remind ourselves that none of us are perfect, we're never going to be perfect, but we can continue to strive and learn. And with anything, I think people are most happy when they're learning and growing and developing. And if we're constantly saying, and we're not there yet, but we're working on it, we're striving towards it, I think that's a powerful message to our teams instead of waiting for perfection to acknowledge it's a job well done. Because perfection's not going to come. But our human nature and treating people in a beautiful way is important. Did you have a question?
Yeah, I have 4 legs to my chair. The first one is I'm in good health. Second is that I have a loving family. The third thing is that I'm relatively financially stable. And the fourth thing is that I love medicine. I am not burned out, but I'm frequently pissed off. And there are some things that I know that I cannot agree with, I cannot overcome. I cannot change the culture of the hospital, which is changing to me in a way that I don't like. I cannot agree with many things that the hospital puts on us, and I use that in a true plural because I see physicians in the physician's lounge bent over their computers, battling Epic and putting little check marks by things. So I have to keep reinventing myself. But if one of my legs of my chair break, then I'm going to go to hell. And so each of us are such individuals that each of us have our weaknesses and have our strengths. And it's when one of those weaknesses overcomes one of our strengths, then we get either burnout, depression, or suicide.
So how do we best support you? And the model I showed earlier is our best representation on how to support each individual. Each individual will have their separate areas, but it's a really nice visual that you're giving of that 4-legged stool, and that's important. I think that's important to know. We do need to work at the highest level of the organization to try to make the changes that are needed or try to be involved in the changes. I hear often from our physicians when they design the new facility at Stanford. I mean, it's going to be opening this next year. They didn't ask for a lot of physician input. And that's a problem. We need to get our physicians in the rooms making the decisions about how their workflow and their work format is going to be. That's a huge piece of this that we're not including that in there. I mean, it is, again, up to the individual to take care of the specific medical types of things and the physical resilience pieces, but we as an organization at the top level need to be involved in creating the culture and making sure the efficiency of practice, because that goes back to the EPIC. If EPIC is there and it's burning our folks out, then how do we do something different? The problem is it's all tied back to regulatory pieces. There's so many people dependent on the information that goes into EPIC, is that it's going to take an incredible overhaul at a much higher level than this we're at. But acknowledging, I think, is the first step, because we need to be able to take care of that. You didn't go into medicine to spend 32 hours a month above and beyond your routine and your work schedule to take care of information in EPIC. We understand that, but we need to start talking about that, and we just hadn't up until, I think, we've seen that whole picture. Yes. Yes.
Ethics is really the elephant in the room here, and how much difference do you see in the generational gap between older physicians that did not have to grow up with this nightmare, who speak of almost nothing else when you get together with them socially? That's the first thing that they bring up. They just want to rail on it. And younger physicians that grew up on Nintendo and play video games by instinct. How do they?
They're not happy with it either. I mean,
they're not.
I mean, people, they don't want to go into medicine. I mean, I do think we have a tidal wave coming of it. You know, it used to be people would go into medicine because they cared about their patients, certainly, but they also knew they were going to have a good life and a good means to support their family. That's just not as compelling anymore because of the amount of time. It doesn't do any good to make some decent money if you can never see your family. And so we're understanding that I think there is going to have to be a shift, but again, it's going to have to come on the national level and the boards and people talking about it that have some authority to make some changes. Because you didn't go into medicine to stare at a computer. And that's what we have to acknowledge. Yes.
You know what? I think I was lucky enough to observe the way computers being used in medicine. So that was like 20 years ago in Taiwan. I don't know if anybody's ever experienced like the healthcare system in Taiwan. So physicians are competing to use computer on their own expenses. And then, but the way it was done is like, okay, the physician's like, okay, my neighbor is like, hey, that guy is now can see like 50 patients a day. I'm still like 20 because I'm writing everything. And then, so now they will hire a computer guy, come in and look into and observing how they practice. They say, oh, let me develop something that computer actually make their life easier. And then, so then it's actually, as what you said, it's like you're involved in that. You actually like, you know, so you want the computer actually like it's good. I mean, those are things that you can control and then help, you know, notice that what you need and then to get your life easier. Because, you know, you want a Marxist, like, you know, like if we run a practice, you know, you probably have a list of probably 5, maybe 10 antibiotics that usually written, right? And then there's a certain weight, and then all they do is like everybody get a barcode scan, and then they look into it, you scan it, it's in, the pharmacy got it. And then it's next. And then the immunization. They're all like, you know, so then it's like, it just flows. And then the doctor, like the minute that the patient walks out, the chart is done. And then, so then it tailored to you. And then when I saw that come to America, I mean, I was actually like, you know, doing my fellowship still in Pittsburgh, they were doing this like study on Cerner. And then, oh boy, I mean, it's become like almost like a national dilemma because like they say it's like comparing who used the Cerner without the person that uses Cerner actually increased mortality and then delayed on care. Everything was there. So then actually it's like Dr. Richard Orr was like pioneering this study, and then they gave him hard time. They want him to withdraw his study. And then but I think that what in practice here is like they gave you Epic, Cerner, couple of vendors. Then you make the live person learn the computer. And then, so then, you know, it's not that computer learning you. And then, now, like the institution they buy, I think there's a lot of monetary things involved in here. Because if you can tailor the ethic into different ways, but that will cost a lot of money, but they don't want it.
Well, we're hoping when they're seeing the burnout rates and what's going to cost to lose employees, I think that we've gotten the attention. Yeah.
I agree with Leslie in that I'm 54. So I started my career doing papers, and I came here 4.5, 5 years ago, and all of a sudden I have to learn Epic. I almost quit. I love my job. I love to spend lots of time with my parents. I used to finish my charts at home and stay till midnight finishing them to figure out Epic. And I stuck it out till I figured it out, but it's just,
yeah.
Because
and we're not, unfortunately, we're not going to solve it here.
And when I see it, what it's doing to the younger generation, the story of a patient who comes into, especially when they come into the hospital with sickness, it's a story. It's not a digital world. It's an analog world. It's you connect this piece of information, you put it together, it's a flowing story. Epic does not let you do that.
Well, my hope is if Stanford can't solve this, John Muir will. Somebody's going to have to solve this, and my hope is that it is the case. I wish I had a magic wand. I wish I was at on the top level.
One of my suggestions is Epic is dominant in the country. They do not share. They have contracts with people, and nobody shares their little secrets. If the hospitals coalesce as a union and say we're on strike with Epic unless you give us all your best fixes for everywhere so that we can all learn together instead of this silo here, this silo here. Maybe it will help. It's
So
just
those are the
ridiculous.
kinds of solutions, and what we don't want to do is just assume there's nothing we can do about it. We don't want to go to that realm. Let's assume we can do something about it. What are we going to do? Not could we do something, it's how are we going to do something to fix this? And again, that's a topic. I'd like to get into some more of this stuff that we're going to, again, the culture, because we're not going to fix EPIC in the room today, but we do know that that is the elephant in the room. So I encourage each of you to get involved at a regional, national level. Let's get this fixed, but it's going to take a lot of people to do that. Yes.
EPIC has a couple of problems, and one, it was designed for hospitals to be able to capture the ability to build. Income was the main thing, not clinical information. The second is that this hospital, your hospital, the VA, Kaiser all use EPIC, and they can't talk to one another. If a patient goes from one system to the other, start over.
Well, again, let's find out if we can get even leaders in those places together. If we start someplace, again, I'm not at that level, but I've got 15 minutes. I want to get back to this because this is a heated thing, and I'd love for, again, if you and Stanford even came together, tried to solve it, let's get those conversations at a higher
Can I make
level.
one comment?
Sure.
One of the payment coordinators, Lily and I are partners. What is your last name? Dr. Hannah.
Maha.
Dr. Maha. Dr. Maha Hannah, nice to meet you. If everybody puts something in the comments on your electronic evaluation, that is really going to have an impact on our leaders. Look at all of them. Our medical staff leaders, they have 63% pull, right?
Yes.
All right. Yeah, thank you.
So those are the kinds of things. Let's not just put our hands in the air and just complain, we want to complain about it because there's so many people, everybody complains about it. Everywhere I go, EPIC is up, EPIC fails. But we need to figure out steps and solutions at a much higher level to do something because we can't. We can't just assume we can't do anything. The Serenity Prayer is one of the perfect things, and we can do something about this, but it's going to take rallying together. Okay, so I want to talk to you about Google's 2-year study. Google did a 2-year study about the perfect team. And they thought that they would go in and that the perfect team would have one project manager, one analyst, one admin, one of each being, and they were going to design the perfect team, and they were going to be able to show the world what it takes to get a perfect team. And they even surprised themselves because what they found was not what they expected. And in the 2-year study for the theme, what they found is the #1 thing was psychological safety. That psychological safety was the #1 ingredient to have a high-functioning, psychologically safe, well-grounded team. The second one is dependability. You need to be able to depend on your coworkers, the structure and clarity. We need to know what the responsibilities are and the structure of the organization, clarity. We need meaning in our work. And right now, we just sometimes forget, but every one of you in this room, I know, have very deep meaning. Physicians have meaning in their work, does not matter. Nurses, APPs, all of us have meaning in our work that's tied to taking care of our patients. And then, of course, impact. And again, you guys have 4 and 5 that's taken care of for you. You have impact, you have meaning in your work. This is where we got to work for on the ideal team as Google found it. And what we also learned is that psychological safety, it was first coined actually back in 1965. And psychological safety is essential for making people feel secure and capable of behavior change during organizational shifts. And I like this, and I've been trying to find a clearer version of it. What if we don't change at all and something magical happens? And you see the profits going down, sales going down. So what we're trying to do is get our teams ready for change, because if there's anything that's consistent in the world, it's change. And that change is going to continually happen. So what is psychological safety? Well, psychological safety means that people on your team are comfortable making mistakes. Again, we've got to emphasize that we're striving for perfection, but we understand mistakes happen. That we learn from failure, where everyone's open to ideas, and we have better innovation. Now, that sounds really scary for perfectionists in the room, which probably most of you are, but the adverse of that is that psychological danger. When we create a team that's afraid of making mistakes, you have that fear of making mistakes, you start blaming others, you're less likely to share your different views, and then you have this common knowledge effect. Well, you know, EPIC, it's like we've always had to do it, and then we'll just keep doing it that way. When Amy Edmondson, who is the expert on psychological safety, did some work on the East Coast, at a hospital on the East Coast, she went in with the assumption that she was going to find psychologically safe teams made less mistakes. And she was shocked to find that the reporting, when the results were in, the psychologically safe team made a lot more mistakes. So she dove further into the data and found out that the reason for that is that the psychologically safe teams were okay admitting a mistake. And then the team was able to learn from it. And it benefited their patients because everybody on the team could acknowledge the mistake and fix it for the next time. The problem was the other teams, the psychologically unsafe teams, would not make a mistake and would hide it at all costs. They spent more energy hiding those mistakes so that nobody even knew they were happening, so those mistakes continued. And the blaming and the less likely to share new information. And so the psychological safety piece, I think, is what's really important for us to be able to look at. And as leaders, we either create that psychological safety or we take it away from our team members. And one of the videos that I want to share is this, because it's kind of funny in this little video clip I'm going to show you, but not so funny if it's in an operating room.
The ASH experiment is one of psychology's oldest and most popular pieces of research. A volunteer is told that he's taking part in a visual perception test. What he doesn't know is that the other participants are actors, and he's the only person taking part in the real test, which is actually about group conformity.
Please begin. The experiment you will be taking part in today involves the perception of line length. Your task will be simply to look at the line here on the left and indicate which of the 3 lines on the right is equal to it in length. So, for example, if you...
The actors have been told to match the wrong lines. The volunteer will be monitored to see if he gives the correct answer or if he goes along with the opinion of the group and gives the wrong answer. In the first test, the correct answer is 2.
1. 1. 1. 2. 1.
Once again, the correct answer is 2.
3. 3. 3. 3.
3.
The ASH experiment has been repeated many times, and the results.
So again, it's funny here, but it's certainly not funny if this is an operating room and one of your team members has some vital information but have been afraid to speak up. And so that's where the psychological safety comes in, is are they safe speaking up if they see something? And what we really want is that. Sometimes we think we don't want that, but at the end of the day, what we need is that vital information. And so when you think about psychological safety, what you're thinking about is the fact that people will shut down when they're not heard. So with psychological safety, individuals are free to focus on the collective goals and problem prevention rather than focusing on self-prevention. This happens to be a succulent for those of you who like succulents, and I love them. I have them in my yard. But we had some contractors over, and a lot of them got dug up. And this is what happens to this plant when it has too much sun and not enough water. It absolutely just starts shutting down. It's the same plant. And so that's what happens to individuals too. If you don't feel heard, you start self-protecting and turning in, and you start paying attention to the rest of the group. And that's what we need to keep from happening, because again, that vital information. So we want to look at happiness level. And I'm saying that this particular study, and I'm speeding up a little bit because I'm running out of time, by Sonia Leber-Mirsky. She's from UC Riverside, and she took a look at the happiness levels. And oftentimes we, again, as perfectionists, we think, well, I'll be happy when, or I'll be happy if, and I'll be happy someday as soon as I get to retirement, or I make this amount of money, or I make it to tenure, or I make it to whatever level that you want to make it to. And we think we're going to be happy in the future. The problem with that is her research has shown that she looked at, well, let's back up a minute. She looked at 2 groups of people. One group that had just won the lottery, the other group that had become paraplegic. Again, a group of people with the lottery, win the lottery. We all think we're going to be happy someday if we just could win the lottery. Other people became paraplegic. What she found is either group of people, within 6 months to a year after the incident, they went back to the exact same happiness level they were before the incident. Because what matters is that your predisposition to be either a happy person, thankful for things, looking at the bright side, being optimistic. How is your brain wired to look for the positive or look for the negative? We joke about it, glass half full or glass half negative, but we're all wired in those certain ways. And if you're happy today, you're going to be happy when you win the lottery. And you're going to be okay, even if something bad happens to you. But the same is true. If you're miserable today, it doesn't matter how much money you win in the lottery, in 6 months to a year, you're going to be at the same happiness level. So the important thing is to pay attention to those things in your life that can create a happier, more positive you as a leader of an organization that can impact everybody else on your team. So your thoughts and actions are 40% of your happiness level. Those circumstances are really only 10. Genetics. Now, I have a mom that's really Helga. That probably should have been her name. She really, really struggles on the positivity scale, but I have a dad that's pretty positive overall. And so I think I balance out of the genetic side, but I really need to focus on the actions and the things that I think about. I don't want to be miserable, so I'm not going to go home and watch the news every day. It's not going to happen because I don't want that in my world. If I can't do something about it right now, I'll pay attention to know what's happening generally, but I'm not going to sit there and watch the same negativity night after night after night, because that is going to impact me in a big way. Yes?
How much of the genetics would you say then is parenting?
Well, again, I don't know if they've teased out that, because certainly our parents kind of teach us to pay attention to certain things or not certain things. And so a lot of it is the environment of how did they handle stress? Did they look for every negative threat in there? And I'm going to get a little bit to that, but let me hurry up. Can I have a few minutes afterwards, or do we have to end right at 8:30? What's that? So when we get to this, there's some great work by Barbara Fredrickson. She's from the East Coast over at Duke, and she's looked at the positivity ratios of teens. And this is where it's important, because when we look at positive emotions, you know, when something's going well and we think about something that's going well, we focus on something that's going well, we tend to have novel ideas and relationships. We tend to build our more enduring personal resources, and we have more of a survival thing. And so what we need to do is pay attention to those little things that are those positive emotions that can have this broaden and build theory of that positive emotion moving up. So instead of getting in that black hole of negativity, we've all been there, where we just want to close the doors, close the shutters, roll up in a ball, and tell the world to go away. And instead, what we need to do, and even with our patients, instead of letting them, you know, just dwell on everything that's wrong, is how do we broaden their scope and look at what's possible? Because when we get in that black hole of negativity, it's hard for us to see beyond our little world of hurt. When we're back, when the world is our oyster, when something really good happens, we tend to go, wow, okay, I just finished this next thing, I learned this, next year I'm going to do this and this and this, and then somebody nicks your car, and what happens? You kind of start spiraling down again. And so we need to broaden that, and for our patients as well, help them set goals and visions and broaden what they're looking at, instead of focusing down onto that little bit of negative that's there driving. So what Barbara found is that she could look at a transcript of a group talk, and she could predict whether there was a low performance team, mid performance team, or high performance team based on the ratio of positive to negative interaction. So for a low performing team, if you, for every positive thing, you have a negative thing to back that up, you're going to have a low performing team. And she's been able to duplicate this over and over again. You have a mid performing group, you have 2 positives to every 1 negative, and a high performing group is about 6 to 1. High performers ask a lot of outward questions, and they ask questions as much as they defend their own views, where the low performers were inward focused on protecting themselves. So that's another predictor of how your team is. And equally important on the personal level, the research by John Gottman has found a similar thing. Flourishing marriages have 5 positives to every 1 in speech, and the observed emotions, keep in mind that eye rolling, crossing your arms, those are all negative emotions, so those count as well. And what he was able to predict with 94% accuracy, which relationships would make it or fail within 2 years. So he was able to predict, actually he looked back over 20 years of work, and he was able to predict with 94% accuracy which marriages would make it or fail based on watching them for 15 minutes, interact with each other in the positive or negative. So that's important, and we like to share that with our employees as well. So how many of you have heard of the 3 good things? I'll just go through that real quick. We use this a lot, particularly in our pediatric division. This is an activity that, again, you can use with your patients. It's called 3 good things. And what they found, it was original work was done by Martin Seligman, who's sort of the father of positive psychology. And what they found is by doing this activity that takes about 1 hour spread over 2 weeks, so about 4 minutes a day, that you will be happier in 6 months, whether you're on a placebo or they actually figured out even if you're on Prozac. Doing this exercise for 4 minutes a day will make you happier in 6 months than if you were on Prozac. You willing to try it? Anybody? Okay. So this is the trick, and this you can do with your team or kids too. For evolutionary reasons, we are hardwired to remember negative stuff and to look for negative stuff that can harm us. The problem is, if there's a snake over here and I turn from that snake, and let's just say the snake is Helga that just looked at us wrong and criticized us and barked at us and is mad, that's a threat, right? But our body see that, don't see that threat as, oh, she's just being mean. We fight or flight, right? Somebody attacks us and it becomes fight or flight. Well, if I'm turning away from Helga and this snake and I'm going this way, I'm not looking for the daisies. I'm looking for the next threat, and every one of you are a threat, and I'm going to look for what you're going to do wrong because I'm in survival mode. That's the problem with the negative vibe and leaving it to evolutionary practices. We're constantly looking for the next threat, and that's human nature. So in order to make that change so that you're not in this negative spiral, what we need to do is start focusing on the good things in our lives. We need to make it a point to pay attention to things that are going well instead of continually driving for the lack of perfection, because that's what will often cause burnout if we just focus on those things instead of what's actually going well in our lives. And believe it or not, instead of focusing continually on the negative, you will be a happier person and a better provider for your family and for your patients if you can see the positive side of some of these things. And so the activity is simply this: before you go to bed at night, just write down 3 good things that happened today and your role in making it happen. And I will tell you, I saw this work incredibly well. 3 years ago, I have 2 stepsons. I have 2 children, 28, 27, and 2 stepboys, 22 and 20. 3 years ago, our youngest was 17, and he lost both his biological mother and his biological grandmother within 90 minutes of each other, both from liver failure. A month later, found out he was skipping school. He wasn't attending school. We were dropping him off every day, but he was not going in. And so I did what all wellness professionals would do, and I took him to Red Lobster for lunch. And just tried to get him to talk because he was miserable, but he wasn't communicating with us. And what we did find is that I tried to ask him, I said, Colin, can you tell me one good thing that's happened in your life? I asked him for 3, but he couldn't come up with one. I said, I wanted to say, hey, I took you to Red Lobster for lunch. Could that be one good thing that's happening? He couldn't even say that. And so by the time I said, then tell you what, let's just have lunch. And tonight, when we get home, can you give me one thing before I go to bed? So you can stay up 3 hours after me. I said, before I go to bed, can you give me one good thing? And it was tough, and I had to ask him another 3 times that night, but he was able to come up with one good thing. And as the research indicated, by day 4 or 5, I think it was day 3, that he actually went back to school. He sat in the lunchroom with his friends, and that night he was able to give me 3 good things. But it took focusing on what was right, because absolutely he could have dwelled on what was wrong. He could have been poor me for a very long time. It was a horrible thing. We still cannot believe that that happened, but it did, and he was suffering. But being able to turn it around instead of focusing on the negative and focusing on the positive, we were able to bring him out of that. And what the clinical trials has found, by focusing on the positive, you're able to reduce the burnout and conflict at work. You're going to have more increased work-life balance because, again, you're looking for what's right. As Brené Brown says, oftentimes we go to bed at night thinking of that we never got enough done today, and we wake up in the morning, our feet hit the floor, and we didn't get enough sleep. We are living in a world of lack instead of living in a world of abundance. And that impacts how we look at the world when we're constantly not good enough. We're constantly not doing enough, sleeping enough, giving enough. And what we need to do is start looking at what's right in our world so that we can have more energy to take care of what we want to improve in our lives. And work-life balance goes up because, again, you're looking at your whole world as one, levels of happiness and sleep quality. Because instead of going to sleep stressed about how imperfect you are and everything you missed out or should have done or could have done and what you have to do tomorrow, you're thinking about the blessings in your life, and your sleep quality will improve. It's been shown over and over again. And so we have this common need. Again, as a doctor, you have meaning and purpose, this love and relationships. And oftentimes when I'm learning and I'm reading a book that I recommend to all of you, and I'm going to be working on a new presentation about this, the Self-Compassion book by Kirsten Neff, is there's a lot about forgiveness, about the things that we haven't done, the things that we have done, all of those things. To be in an abundant life is being able to look at all of those things and focus on those positives. If you haven't in the past, I recommend looking at your core values and having that handy so that you know what it is. My thinking is you probably all have a handful of your top 3 to 5 values that you live by. For me, kindness is a non-negotiable. And it took me a lot of years to figure that out because success is really important to me. I went to Stanford, I competed at Stanford, all those things, that perfectionism. But what I've learned is success is not important if I am not in a kind environment where people are treating each other with respect. It's simply become a non-negotiable for me. That's one of my top 3, and I'm not going to be in an environment that does not have that and creating it. I encourage you to write a personal mission statement to remind you of the things that you want to do and how you want to show up in the world. Mine happens to be this. I've worked with teams to pull these together. That my life's work is to create soul-lifting connections with individuals and organizations that allow me to share science-based best practices and inspire joy-filled living. That's what inspires me on a day-to-day basis. And being able to care for self is critical in that. And for me, having that mission statement to support me and having those values and standing by those values is really important as well. Any questions? I know we kind of got sidetracked a little bit ago, so I'm just trying to get through some of these things. So I recommend the book Eat, Move, Sleep by Tom Rath. It's very focused and it's got a lot of really great research. The back of the book, pages and pages and pages of all the research he found. If you're not familiar with Tom Rath, I recommend you maybe get a chance to look at the work he's done. He has a disease called von Hippel-Lindau. And so every year he goes in, find out if he has another year to live, and if he does some more research to find out how the best way to live your life is, because that's what his life work is. And he is actually the author of StrengthsFinder 2.0. His grandfather was Don Clifton. So of course, how we eat is important. That gives us more energy to what we accomplish. How we move is important, to keep ourselves flexible and moving and fit and happy is of course important. And again, there's resources on all these things. And being able to get enough sleep. We're learning more and more about the vital role that sleep provides in all that we do. Some of the things that I want to also point out in the importance of sleep, again, going back to what I said earlier, that badge of honor of not getting enough sleep, what research is finding is 2 consecutive nights with less than 6 hours of sleep is associated with decreases performance, which can last up to 6 days. That is how we start looking at sleep in a different way, and then it's no longer this badge of honor. It actually is detrimental to not only ourselves, but our patients. After 17 to 19 hours without sleep, performance was equivalent to worse than that of a blood alcohol level of 0.05. That's important to know. After longer periods without sleep, performance reaches levels of BAC of 0.1%. That's compelling for our teams that are just not getting enough sleep. We can't do our best work without the amount of sleep that we need. So again, this goes back to our need for self-compassion, the acceptance of human limitations, but our pursuit of the perfect medical practice. And again, one way to bridge that is through self-compassion.
I think the millennials do that very well.
The self-compassion piece?
Yes.
Yes, they do. I think they do.
That wasn't a compliment.
Yeah. Well, no, it is, and I think some of us struggle with that, and I will tell you I do, because I grew up, you work your tail off and you get it done, and theirs is more like, no, I've got my 40 hours and I'm good, I'll go home, I'm good now. And so we struggle. I struggle with it, because I don't want to be critical when they're doing what I should be doing. And so how do we figure out a way to bridge that gap in a way that we can all take better care of ourselves? Because what I find, I get resentful when they put up their boundaries, and then I'm working all weekend because they've got boundaries and I don't. So that's a learning place for all of us. Instead of me getting resentful, I need to find a way to bridge that gap and to figure out how to do it better. Of course, gratitude is important. We talked about that earlier. How do we share more gratitude in our organization? How do we encourage more sharing of gratitude for what people in our lives are doing? How do we share that across the board? How do we spend time in nature to sort of deflect some of the stress that we're having? There's a lot of research around the importance of being in nature and the non-judgmental realm of being out in nature, taking a few minutes to see the sunset, the sunrise, and being part of all of that. A lot of research around that. 4-7-8 breathing. How many of you have tried that or know what that is? Another really great thing that you can use with your patients, even the families of patients that are a little anxious. And we can just try that real quick. I know we're out of time, but it's as simple as this. You just breathe it. You can keep your eyes open if you want, but as you're sitting there, just relax your shoulders. Breathe in for a count of 4. Hold it for a count of 7. And then exhale through your mouth through a count of 8. And I know the first time I did it, I was like, And I couldn't control quite that. This was quite a few years ago. But as we're doing it and we're regulating our breath, as we're breathing in, holding it, and then exhaling it, it just really takes care of some of that anxiety. And what it does is it keeps you from going into the past stress or the future stress, and it makes you come into the present moment. Because in the present moment, our body just does not exist anywhere but the present moment. And when you can think about your breath, that's what helps you come into that de-stressed state of the present moment. Our bodies don't exist 2 seconds ago. They don't exist in the future. They only exist the here and now. And so when we can focus on our breath work, you can't be thinking about past or future when we're focused right here on our bodies. So here's our quiz. Number 1, our happiness is approximately 50% dependent on our circumstances. True or false?
False.
False. What was the number? How much of our happiness is on our circumstances? 10%. Good job. Good job.
See, you're just like looking for the right answer. That's again striving for perfection.
Well, I was asked to put these questions in as part of the thought process.
I mean, we could have placed like 30 with now.
So, number 2, it's best to write 3 good things. A, first thing in the morning. B, with your team once a week. Or C, within 2 hours of going to sleep. C, excellent. The author of Positivity is Martin Seligman, J. Brian Sexton, or Barbara Fredrickson? Barbara Fredrickson. Nicely done. And then which of the following is not a documented component of burnout? Number A, emotional exhaustion. 2, reduced performance. 3, change in appetite. Or D, interpersonal disengagement. C. Excellent. You guys are great. Absolutely fantastic. Hopefully this has helped you think about a few things in terms of some motivation and all this work. Yes.
One comment. I wonder if you might comment on the sex differences in your work at Stanford, how men and women differ in the burnout.
We don't have the answers to that yet, but based on the anecdotal evidence in terms of the story I told, my guess is that a lot of it will have to do with the self-compassion piece. Women tend to beat themselves up much more than men do, and I don't want to make that a blanket statement because I know a lot of men that beat themselves up very, very well. They're professionals at it.
Women need to get together and talk about things.
Right, and that would kind of argue for the other side, because I think it's helpful to talk about some things if you have a solution. You know, talk about it, but don't come to me and talk about it. Come to me with some kind of solution to fix it, right? So we don't know the answer to that yet. That's one of the things we're looking into.
I would think that a lot of those women were probably in conflict with childcare issues.
That too. Mm-hmm.
That would be a big one. Whether they're even, mothers yet or not, they obviously don't see how they can ever integrate being a parent into that environment.
Yeah. And we didn't ask some of those questions. I don't know if they're adding some of those in for 2019, but that's probably one of the things, because we do want to tease out what that difference is. And women do have more of a role in the childcare, and so it is more stressful. I did a monthly group where I met with our female physicians, those who wanted to come. There were about 10 in the group. And the first meeting, I don't think we really needed to go past the second meeting, frankly, because the first meeting, it was like letting air out of a overstuffed balloon. It was unbelievable, the stress in that room. And it was simply about talking about it. One of the women who was about 8 months pregnant had a 2-year-old at home, and she said, "I'm so stressed out because my son was sick, but can I call in sick, or what do I do, because I don't have any backup, but am I allowed to do that?" And another one of the female doctors who's older and her children are older, she goes, "Absolutely you can do that." But she just didn't know, and she didn't know who to ask, because she didn't have this group. And so how do we create an environment to support each other in a way that's more uplifting than what we currently do? Because her boss, and again, it's not a male or female thing necessarily, but her boss was a male and didn't understand and didn't tell her that she could necessarily do that. Didn't give her permission to say, "Hey, I support you and I understand that you're going to have some tough times here, and I'm here to support you." That's all she probably needed to hear, but she hadn't heard it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming.